America abroad, really this is still looking at the 1920s though. When it comes to economic expansion, the United States really was the world's dominant economic power during the 20s. They are really expanding their global economic role. Their exports are soaring. The United States was the world's largest exporter. And on top of that, investment abroad is going to more than double between 1919 and 1930. A lot of companies during this time period are going to become multinational corporations, and they have branches abroad or subsidiaries abroad, and sometimes they would even gain control of foreign supply sources. There was a little bit concern about this economic invasion. Herbert Hoover, for one, expressed some of these concerns because there was this concern that foreign markets might take markets from American manufacturers and jobs from American workers. But generally speaking, most Americans still are going to promote and be for basically expansion economically abroad. The other way that America is evolved in global matters during this time is the rejection of war. There's basically very little desire to use force abroad, and America's going to seek out to minimize international conflict and basically promote national security. I mean, it's kind of going along with those ideals of the League of Nations and everything there. A big way that they promoted this is trying to help restrict the buildup of armaments amongst nations. It's something like during this time period that we see the suspension of building new ships for a decade and basically virtually freezing the existence power of naval power across the world. And technically the United States would be considered in second place behind Britain having the best navy at this time period. But these are things like that, and a pact that would renounce aggression and outlaw war in 1928, things like that. Though they really didn't have any kind of provision for enforcement of a lot of this, but they were symbolic in the rejection of war. However, as much as America was trying to get away from conflict, there's an element of the Senate is going to still insist on the authority of the Monroe Doctrine, and the United States is still going to claim to have a predominant role in Latin America. America is going to continue to dominate there for their own interests, but they do withdraw troops from certain places like the Dominican Republic and Nicaragua, but Haiti is still under United States occupation. American troops are still in Cuba and Panama to a certain extent, getting involved in some of the financial policies of others, but really you do have a bit more stability at this time period, and America isn't provoking outright Latin American hostility. There is going to be a resolution in 1928 at the Inter-American Conference. Basically, Latin American countries are going to say that, hey, the United States doesn't have the right to intervene in their internal affairs. But it's basically rejected by the United States. But that being said, Hoover's administration is going to rescind support for the Roosevelt Corollary and basically have what they call the good neighbor policy. That being said, he doesn't pledge non-intervention, which actually really brings us to that individual, Herbert Hoover. 1928, the economy is good. Republicans are doing well, they're dominating, and they're going to choose Herbert Hoover for their presidential candidate, which is a really big deal because he really wasn't a politician. He was a successful administrator. He really felt like government should promote business interests and encourage stability and profitability, and all of that prosperity associated with the Republican Party and thus with Hoover is what is going to win him that election. So, looking back at all of the 1920s, characterize the 1920s in one sentence.